All right. So I'll start the presentation now, right? This webinar right now. So basically today I will be presenting of how to protect your Kubernetes data against ransomware. My name is Kelvin Man, right? I'm based in Singapore, and basically I'm a senior SC that covers the whole of APJ, right? And I belong to the Caston by Veeam team, right? If you're not aware what Caston is, in this webinar I will talk about it and basically how to use this product to basically protect your Kubernetes data in a sense, right? So before I start, please note that this session is being recorded, and and basically, if you have any Q&A, please post it in the Q&A button below, right? And then post your questions. I will definitely answer to them during this webinar itself, right? I will be stopping sharing my webcam so that actually so that you can concentrate more on the slides itself. Okay. Okay. So we know that many of you are struggling with data protections in terms of ransomware, right? And then most of you may be thinking of moving to Kubernetes or have already made that jump. So basically what we are going to do is this. This is the agenda we are going to go through, right? Basically, I'm going to talk about what Caston is, right? What we as a product can help you to protect against any ransomware attack, right? And how to protect your data in a sense. And then we talk about why the need for immutable backups. Why would this help in a ransomware attack? And how do we fix it, right? How do we fix any data leakage, data corruption, or any ransomware encryption, right? We can authenticate that. And last of all, right, because I'm an SE, definitely I want to show you some cool demos, right? I actually have 2 demos to show you. And after this, I'll actually show you certain resource links of where you can actually grab and do, like, say, hands-on with the Kubernetes environment. We have actually a lab for you to play around with, and also understanding about our products, and also where you can actually go to and understand more about product, and where you can actually download a free trial in a sense. And our free trial is actually for 5 worker nodes. Okay. Okay. Without further ado, let's talk about Caston 10. Okay. Ultimately, Caston K10, right? Why I use K10 is our abbreviation, right? Our focus is on day 2 challenges. Our focus is on day 2 challenges, the data management challenges in that sense, right? So be it whether is it physical, virtual, cloud, or cloud native, as in the Kubernetes itself, right? Our primary focus will be to backup and recovery. Think of this, the 3-2-1 rules. But what does it mean? It means 3 copies of your data on 2 different media types and 1 being offsite. Backup recovery is always the first port of call, right? Because how can we be more efficient, the fastest, right? And then how can we be the fastest to recover that data in case there was a disaster or failure scenario? So think about this. So in secondary, we have our application mobility right here. I believe this will be one of the biggest features that Caston will deliver as more and more people adopt the Kubernetes technology. And what this allowed us to do is really moving our state of workloads from one Kubernetes cluster to another. So it can be something like OpenShift to Tanzu to EKS to, right, and then back to OpenShift itself, right, or the other way around. As K10 got this ability, because the software that we use is not tied into the storage layer that holds our data. We actually do quite the opposite, so that we can help you to move the data freely between all these different platforms without really having a flavored way of using different storage layers or different storage technology in a sense. And then last but not least, right, we talk about disaster recovery, right? What you want is an automated disaster recovery that will settle a lot of the failure scenarios that we see in today's ransomware. So if you look at this, data discovery goes back to the complete outage if there's a flood in your data center or there's a fire in a sense, right? So if you look at this, it can be a natural disaster or all this kind of stuff. And now we're talking about ransomware, which take hold of your data. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one of the example in my demo where you have your cloud credentials compromised. And what does that look like? And how does DR look like at that point if you have a secondary cloud account, right? And then basically a lot of different scenarios you can look at, okay, to when a business failure occurs, okay? So that it can give you a peace of mind that you can automate the workload from one application to another or between another Kubernetes distribution itself. So now let's drill down a little bit further, okay? So if you look at backup and restore, there's some key caveats that we have to think about when it comes to Kubernetes itself, right? Think of this, Kubernetes is now a platform in which we can deploy and host our applications, right? If you think back the old days of virtualization and now the cloud, right? Kubernetes is now a new platform itself, but all these different platforms, there is a requirement. There's definitely a requirement for backup and restore. And the thing is, there's no magic button or no magic platform that remove this requirement for data management. So basically, to do this, we need to have certain characteristics, right? You look at this. First of all, we talk about multi-tenancy, okay? We need to understand the multi-tenancy in terms of the Kubernetes cluster itself. We need to know the different users and roles. We actually introduce more roles that have the operators, the Kubernetes administrators, the developers itself, this kind of stuff. And we have different developers doing different applications, right? So the multi-tenancy aware is actually a key thing, plus the RBAC itself to maintain so that we can back up and restore and understand what are the user credentials, because you do not want a rogue users to go to other applications or other namespace in Kubernetes itself and kind of play around with the environment, right? And other than this is that we also need to have a skill, right? So that we can scale accordingly to what the application or the cluster need in a sense. Our software is able to do that. In terms of the performance, we actually have customers that have got 3 nodes to customers that have 100 to 500 nodes itself, right? And then last but not least, we talk about polyglot persistence, right? Think of this is like agnostic. It's an agnostic environment. Basically, we can protect workloads that basically is on any Kubernetes cluster, like what I mentioned. We have OpenShift, Amazon EKS, VMware Tanzu, right? And then we are able to protect this and able to move workloads in between all these different kind of platforms and Kubernetes distribution. Then let's talk about disaster recovery in the middle. How can I recover my workloads between different vulnerability zones and regions? Okay, how can I manage the different clusters in different zones, the different Kubernetes clusters, right? And when I move from one region, let's say you move from Amazon to Azure or Google, right? Basically, you're different using storage. Okay, how can I do that storage transformation such that the applications that work in AWS will work in Azure or Google itself? So this we do the automatic transformation for you, right? Then we talk about application mobility, right? So application mobility is about being able to address those migration use cases, right? Because when we talk about Kubernetes right now, basically every year you actually do 3 upgrades. Okay, so if you move from one platform to another, right? You need to take care of the application transformation, right? And basically the cluster upgrades that you need to take care of, right? So application mobility is what is a key thing that we are able to move the applications between all these different platforms and Kubernetes distribution, and then transforming not only on the storage itself, on the certain YAML definitions that actually can move between these kind of different platforms, right? So that's the Castor side of things. So now I want to get into the need for an immutable backup, so that we can think that, hey, because of ransomware, right? Ransomware is now probably the biggest and most topic to bring up. Okay, so let's think about it. Why immutable backups? Okay, when we talk about why immutable backups, right? The first thing we think about is accidental deletion, right? So people do make mistakes. We are all human, right? And basically, there will be accident detection in themselves, right? I will actually talk into these key 5 topics in a sense. Okay, then we talk about policy gaps, right? Because now we have a very diverse team. Because the developers, the QA teams, the operations are all going into the same cluster, Kubernetes cluster, all doing their work, right? One is developing the applications, one is maintaining the environment itself, right? So there's so many different hats being worn by different teams to go into the environment itself. So there's certain like a policy gap, and how do we address that in a sense, right? And then when we talk about internal security gaps, threats, right? So basically, you look at this, right? Basically, it's a kind of a scary fact that the internal security threats is actually the most when you consider the external factors itself. This is where ransomware comes in, keeps in the sense, because you need to think over that internal and external security threats. Okay. So as we move down, then we talk about the legal and compliance issues. So basically, to think about that data you have for the amount of time, if it's being compromised, right? So as a business, most probably you're going to pay a hefty fine if you leak that data, right? And if you are not able to access the data itself, right, then how are you going to serve your customers or internal in a sense? Okay. So if you look at ransomware, the big picture, I kind of touched on, right, of the main 5 bullet points, right? But really, if you think about it, it's general across all environment, because the platform doesn't matter anymore, right? Be it whether you're running a virtualization platform or be a cloud. Okay, the attacking companies don't really care what platform you are, don't really care what access they gain, right? They don't care whether are you a Kubernetes cluster or a user, or whether you're on virtualization or cloud, because they just want your data. And after they get your data, they want your money, because that's what they're going to hold you ransom for, right? They're going to take the data, they're going to encrypt, and then they're going to hold you ransom for it. That's why it's called ransomware. But I'm not going to talk about how do we prevent this from a security per se, right? How do we stop things coming in and out, right? In terms of that. What I'm going to touch on is the fundamental piece of ransomware is that it's going to encrypt, right? And it's going to hold ransom the data, right? And then they go exploit you. Okay. So whether I think it's a debatable whether are you going to give up the data, right? Once you pay it, will they give you back the data, right? Will they still leak out the data, right? So if you think of this, if you might heard about the things about the red and blue team, okay? You think about the red team being the bad guys, right? They're the one that are looking for loophole, the gaps in your network perimeter. They can gain access into your environment. Then you think about the blue team, and hopefully everyone on the call is part of the blue team. If not, yeah, okay. Because what we are trying to prevent that, we are trying to stop that from happening, right? This might be an ethical hacker, right? Basically, maybe think about your security team that's just trying to hack into an environment, okay? So we need to prevent this, and what we're going to do as a blue team is to make sure that our data is sound and secure, okay? Whereas the red team are trying to hunt down what access control looks like, any leaks in our access control, right? And they can access our data in a sense. So if you look at this, in 2021, there was actually a Kubernetes focused malware, right? We don't really see in the news, but when there's this X company has been attacked, what happened is that the underpinning hardware is what is being affected. This malware is called littered, right? And it actually targets cloud and container infrastructure. And what it do is once it attack them, it actually use it to mine cryptocurrency, right? So basically, yeah, it's not doing encrypting the data, but then what it's doing is actually once your environment is being targeted, it will leverage the CPU in your environment and then mine, and then basically try to generate cryptocurrency mining operations so that they can earn themselves. Or it also starts deploying malicious codes or deploy code into your environment by using a Docker daemon. Then it runs off as pods within your Kubernetes cluster and it uses your environment. And then basically you have someone in your environment, right, piggybacking on your, maybe you're doing this in AWS or your on-premises, and then you just use your infrastructure or your cloud infra, right, to mine the data, right? So if you are a cloud provider, right, you might never know about this because you might not already have the right task to already set up, but you do not really know whether this actually is in your environment. So what it's going to do is just going to sit there, it's going to scan the environment, it's going to scan the network, and it's trying to understand the day-to-day operations in your environment, right? It's trying to get all the important user credentials into your environment. It's going to get all the potential API keys so that it can actually exploit other environments in a sense, right? That's where once they come and get cold or sensitive data, that's where, right, they're going to exploit it in a sense, and then they're going to encrypt it and put a ransom to you, okay? And hopefully get some cash out of the situation. So I mentioned around insider and vulnerabilities, right? So this goes out to all environments. I mentioned earlier, right? It doesn't mean that if you're on virtualization now and you're thinking of going to Kubernetes, right? It happens to whatever environments that you have. Because I'm highlighting it because Kubernetes doesn't mean that, hey, if I run on this environment, it stop this from happening. Okay, so that is not it will actually happen to different environments instead. So basically, right, anyone that has the ability to have certain access credentials inside your business now, right, inside your different platforms, we need to make sure we have that audit log of whoever has access to it, so that it's actually much easier so that you can know whether is it your internal or customers or partners, right? And then you can see what they're doing, right? Or basically what they're buying, right? And you're able to look into the network access into your company, okay? So if you think of it like ransomware in general, it's quite hard. First, you need to find an entry point. Once you find an entry point, like the littered malware that I talked about, right? You have to sit there and look and wait and kind of see and then gather information so that you can see, wait, these are certain things that I can use, the user accounts, the APIs, this kind of stuff, so they can gain access to the required environment. Okay. So think of this, right? The human errors are like I say, doesn't matter what platform you are as a user, even things that we're using on our PC or Mac, right? Basically, we also do this kind of things like human error, right? And once you do a human error, it ensures that you delete, right? In terms of to those that are not familiar with namespaces, right? Think of it, namespaces is like a resource pool in your VMware, right? Basically, when you accidentally delete a Kubernetes namespace, you are actually deleting all the services in that particular applications, right? So this is pretty, it can happen because it's a CLI commands, and if the user has certain rights to do like kubectl to delete the whole namespace, and happens, right? How are you going to restore for it? Okay, I mean, I was on an analysis call, right? And it was saying that around 80% of outages was caused by accidental deletion. Okay, but human errors are always bound to happen. So basically, we're always doing all this kind of, even you do all this repeatable stuff, right? Errors will happen. Okay, so this is something that you need to restore from. So I don't know if this is going to build up properly, but we can actually go from a preparedness of how we can be better prepared when it comes to this. Okay, so basically, let's look at this. That hey, how do we are always updating our Kubernetes platforms. There are certain APIs that we're always updating, right? So how do we do this kind of different kind of routine audit and security? How many times are you going to do this? Okay, education your team, right? You need to educate, be it your operators, developers, your end user itself, right? How to be more ransomware prepared, right? You do not click on any suspicious links, right? Education, okay? And last but not least, backup, right? So that we can know how to roll back, even if after all these kind of different updates, educations, and things happens, you are still able to restore your data, right? Remember what I mentioned about the 3-2-1 rules, right? 3 copies, 2 size, and then 1 remote in a sense, right? So think of this, right? Master the 3-2-1 rule, okay? So another key part is why are containers so vulnerable, right? We go back to the cloud native world, right? So when you spin up a container, right, basically it grabs a container images, okay? These container images, sometimes you need to ask yourself, is this container image, has it been compromised? Does it comes from a repo that you need to be aware of, right? So these are things that you need during the installation, right? Whether how when you bring the images down, how are you going to lock the system itself, right? So these are the certain things, right? And then, like I mentioned, the most up-to-date Kubernetes updates every 3 times every year. So it's always trying to keep up with Kubernetes and all the different kind of open source database applications, right? How do you make sure that you are actually up to date in a sense, and also your deliverables are up to date, okay? And also, when from a backup point of view, how can we have the outside copy, okay? So I think I'll cover the need for immutability, right? But just to summarize, right? Basically, we are always going to have all these kind of malicious actors, right? That will actually do certain attacks onto your data, and doesn't care what platform itself, right? And basically, if you have the requirement around government and compliance and data retention, okay. So we also have that. We can help you in terms of the accidental data loss where people make mistakes, okay. So I'm going to talk about the fix we've tested and how it can help you in a sense. So how does K10 approach this, right? So basically what we do is we actually is looking at immutability, right? That's where we're coming from. We actually can do an object log such that once the data is stored in there, right? Backup is stored in there. No one can go in and tamper the data, right? So this will actually protect against accidental deletion or compliance. And then I'm going to show you in my demo how easy it is, right? How can you be protecting your data in less than 10 minutes? And how can you protect within you can do a global policy applies to all your different cluster environment in that sense. And you also can create policies, right? That can it kind of automation in that sense, right? That hey, because of certain actions you want to do certain retention in a sense, this might be more sensitive data that you want to keep for more days, right? And then you enable APIs call or self-service portals for your developers to restore the data itself, self-service, right? And then you're not locked in. I mean, you're not locked into a certain kind of brand of storage. You're not locked into a certain kind of technology, right? Be it OpenShift, Kubernetes, or the public cloud itself. Okay, so these are what is our custom K10 unique approach. Another key thing is that, okay, that I did mention, right? The freedom of choice, right? It doesn't matter where your data is, whether is it on the public cloud or be it in NFS storage or be it in AWS S3, right? So of course, you can actually be backup into our Veeam repository itself. Okay, so basically you are able to leverage where you keep the data, right? And basically you actually can, you still can be application consistent, right? Whether where your data is being stored in a sense. Another key fundamental is around what we call worm, right? Worm is write once, read many, right? That's actually how immutability is kind of started in a sense, right? Because once we have written our data, we can read as many times as we want, but we cannot write anymore to the data. That means we cannot write anymore, we cannot encrypt the data, or we cannot corrupt the data in that sense. So that's where immutability makes sense. Okay. So part of this demo, what I want to show you is this. I'm going to show you a backup with S3 object logs. Right. You look at this. Basically, on the right side hand side, this is our custom platform. What we do is we just do a simple click, and it will actually check on the S3, right? And whether do we meet all these objectives in the sense, right? Whether has we done the object log enable? Has we has at least a default retention period of 21 days? Okay, so this is actually what we actually do to check on Amazon S3 or any S3 object storage. Also, we have the ability to leverage different retention modes, right? So that, let's say, be governance, where you can override, but from compliance point of view, okay, right? Basically, we actually can also cannot be overwritten, so that our customer, we actually advise our customers to go, because even if you go to AWS and you go and delete your account, right? Your data is still on the list, on the S3 disk, wherever they may be, even if the account is being deleted. Okay. Okay. So again, the governance and compliance, right? Whether we want to keep it for legal hold environments, and then how long you want to do it, right? And then basically doing this set duration. Sorry, you cannot modify the data. Okay, make sense? Okay, so last and not least, let's dive right into the demo. Okay. So this is a recorded demo. Okay. So let me run this. So this is our custom dashboard, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new location profile. Location profile is actually where I create a bucket to store the data itself. Okay. So basically I create a new data, right? So you can see that the profile name is where I create the profile itself. And after that, I click on S3, okay? And then you can look at this. There's all the different kind of storage that we actually are able to support out of the box, right? So basically, Google Cloud Storage, Azure Storage, and NFS itself, right? And even our Veeam backup server where you can put the data inside, okay? Following that, you will need to put, because you choose Amazon S3, you need to put the access key and credentials, and then you actually use the click the region, and then you create the bucket name. And then this is where I want to point out the enable immutable backups, right? So by clicking this, the enable immutable backups, right? Basically, this will enable the bucket itself to have this kind of properties. Okay, so let's go to our AWS, right? You look at this. Our AWS, I created a bucket, okay, and it's actually in EU West 2 region, okay. Okay, so let's go into the bucket itself and then see where I've set certain permission. Okay, right? You can see that because object lock is enabled for this bucket. Okay, and certain things that I've already done. Okay, object lock is enabled. Default retention is enabled. Right, the compliance, and I've done 21 days of retention period. So this is what I've already configured beforehand in my S3. Okay. So if you look at this, right, I've actually set this up in my Amazon S3. So let's go back to here and click enable immutable buckets. So you will quickly check, right, and validate itself. Okay. So you can see that, hey, I can now query the object store, right? This object exists. Okay. It exists in the provided region. Okay. It has object locking enabled, as I showed you earlier on. Okay, there's a default retention configuration applied where the default retention mode is compliance with at least 21 days. So it does a bare minimum check that certain these kind of things happens before it goes ahead, so that it can save the profile in a sense. Right. So once this is all okay, then I save the profile. Okay. Okay, so once create, right, you can see that the profile is created, right? And now when you create a new backup policies, okay, I can create a new backup. So in here, I can create a new backup policies. I can create a name for the backup policies. I can do a snapshot onto the particular application itself. It will back up every services, any config map, anything that's inside the particular namespace, or actually can import certain backup data itself, right? And then how frequent do I want to do that, right? Do I want to back up the applications by a namespace, or do I want to back up by labels, right? Okay. And then this where I actually choose the export where I want to keep the backup information. Okay. So this is the bucket that I actually created earlier on, and it's the immutable bucket, right? Okay. So that's about it. So basically, this ensures that whatever, by creating the bucket and clicking object lock on it, right? And then now you are able to create backup policies to this immutable bucket in that sense, right? Make sense? If you have any questions right now, right, or along the way, right, just feel free to put in the questions in the chat. I'll answer them later on. Okay. All right. So in my demo earlier on, what happens? Okay. Basically, we have an app running in a Kubernetes cluster, right? The data is stored on a PVC, which is a MySQL server, right? I've been backing up the data frequently, exporting the restore point to S3, right? And this S3 bucket is actually object locking enabled, okay? And what I'm going to show you in the next demo is that an attacker has actually compromised your Kubernetes cluster and your S3 credentials, right? They are able to go into it, right? And basically they encrypt the data, right? And they delete the K10 restore points in S3 too, right? So basically, if you look at this, if you go inside the bucket, right, with no object locking, definitely fail. But if object locking is actually enabled, okay, basically the attacker will not be able to write anything onto the bucket itself, right? They will not be able to encrypt the data, and basically restoration will actually succeed. So this is what I'm going to show you in my next demo. Okay, so come back to here, right? Basically, I've created my policies earlier. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this code, right? Basically, what happened is you can see that, hey, this is actually all the data that belongs in my SQL. Okay, now I'm going to do what, okay, and then you're going to see that the object store is actually there, right? The bucket is there, right? And then we go and run a ransomware demo, right? So basically, I'm going to do a database attack where it will kind of delete and encrypt the data. Okay. Then now I'll do a bucket attack. Okay. Now basically removing all the objects in the bucket. Okay. So now if we go to objects, hey, it's not there anymore. So what happens? All right. What can I do? Okay. So going to here, right? Let's take a pause in the demo. Right. Basically, you can actually create and restore from the restore point. So going to the restore point, you are able now to quickly restore from the application itself, right? And then just by clicking restore, now you are able to restore based on that immutable storage that's happening in that you have actually created earlier on in my first demo. So if I do a kubectl and get ports, right? Basically now the restoration is happening. Okay, you can see that it's actually bringing up my SQL, and actually now it's bringing up the container, and now it's actually restoring the data. And from the dashboard, you can see, hey, this is actually what is happening in the dashboard. And you can actually, if you do not have credentials to go into the CLI command, that's where you also can see what's happening and whether it's a successful restoration in a sense, right? So in this particular demo, what happens is that it actually restores everything, or everything in the whole application itself. And the good thing about Castle is that we actually can restore granular restoration. So basically, if you're looking at certain things that actually is corrupted in your services, you can actually look into that and basically only restore certain services so that you can have a faster restoration and bring up your certain services in a sense, right? So basically, if it's a credentials that's been compromised, you actually can restore only the credentials that matters to you. Okay, so let's move along, right? So because this will take a while, right? Can you see that the restoration happens, right? So I'm gonna come back to here, right? You can see that it's actually creating all the different kind of containers and restoring into data into the containers itself. Okay. So once completed, right? Once completed, okay. Basically, we can actually go into the MySQL and then make sure that by copying the code above, right, you can see that all these important informations are there. Nick, Albert, all this kind of stuff is still there, and it makes sense that all the restorations are actually happening in this sense. All right. So what a demo is that how easy to enable immutable storage in Kasten, right? And then from there, once you have enabled immutable storage, right, even if the ransomware or a hacker comes in to hack your data, to delete your applications, to corrupt your applications itself, delete your S3 bucket, right, you still is able to restore the data from your immutable storage. Okay, right. So couple of resources I want to share with you all. Right, take out your handphones, and if you want to do and scan the QR code here. Right, these are a couple of resources that you can look at. So one is something what we call a Kasten.io, right? our Kasten Labs itself. Okay, so basically from here, if you have zero Kubernetes and you just want to know how to understand more about Kubernetes itself, this is where you can come in, and then there's free labs for you to understand what's Kubernetes, what's the security things that matters, right? This is where you can actually come and learn and do the hands-on lab, and badges will actually be awarded to you after each lab completion, right? There's multiple labs in there so that you can do a quick hands-on and understanding of the Kubernetes environment. And from there, you also can do a understanding of our cluster product, okay? And if you already have a Kubernetes environment, right, why not scan this, right? Basically, what will happen is you are able to download Kasten, and it basically give you the link of how to install Kasten itself. If you do a help install, you will actually do about a 5-minute installation, and you're done. Okay. And the thing is, for our we are actually free for 5 worker nodes, right? So basically, you want to test out our software, feel free to go and test out in a sense, right? To reiterate, I'm Kelvin Man. I'm actually the product specialist for Kasten, right? Technical specialist in terms of the whole APJ. So reach out to me if you have any problems or you need any more in-depth understanding of the product itself. Okay. If not, let's go into Q&A. So the first question, what is the obligation of cloud provider like Google Cloud for ransomware attack? Right. I mean, this is not a question for me to answer, right? Definitely, you need to go back to your people like your Google Cloud or AWS or be a managed cloud provider, right? Basically, when you sign to them, right, they definitely will have certain TNAs for ransomware. But from what I know, when that happens, right, it's actually the responsibility of the end user, the customers or your partners in terms of managed cloud providers, right, to manage the data itself, right? It's more, it lies between the end user, because if you do not secure, like what I mentioned about insider, right, and external threats, right? If you do not even do this kind of things, frankly speaking, this is just a platform. You need to do your diligence to protect your environment. Okay. Next question. On the slide for accidental deletion, we are using MS Microsoft Office with OneDrive. That protect of accidental delete is okay, right? It really depends, right? If your OneDrive, okay. I mean, whether are you going to have policies to back up that data in the OneDrive itself, right? So I will leave the answering of this to Microsoft people. But think of this: if you have concern for it, right? Look at certain backup solution to back up that data to somewhere else, right? And then make sure that you protect it with some immutable storage in a sense. Okay, what is the cost of solution? I'm using mixture of AWS, Azure, and on-premises. How is your solution application on ransomware protection? Right? Great question, Sky. What happens is that for the cost of the solution, you can reach out separately to me, and my CS will be most happy to come back to you on the cost of the solution itself. For a technical perspective, right? Kasten is able to run on different Kubernetes cluster, like I mentioned, right? Be it whatever Kubernetes distribution you have or platform itself, we are able to run on it, and then we are able to back up the applications that's running on the different Kubernetes cluster, and then we are able to back up onto a storage that then you can enable immutable, make sure that the storage is actually immutable, and then you protect the data from it. Then you can look at, then basically you are looking at this, because we can work with different kind of storage that has this ransomware protection, and we can actually then protect your data in a sense. Right. So AWS also, next question, AWS also has some sort of backup too. So how does that differentiate from your solution, right? So look at this. I mean, certain, I won't go into that differentiator discussion right now, but certain things that matters is that, we are from a dashboard perspective, right? We are able to dive into your whole Kubernetes cluster. We are able to understand all the different applications that's running in your Kubernetes cluster, right? And then in each applications, there's multiple services, there's compliments, there's different kind of services that's running inside it, right? We are able now to back up all the different kind of services. We are able to do a granular restorations, right? We are able to do the different storage transformation, the application transformation if you are going to move from one environment to another, right? Being let's say, for example, from one EKS cluster to another, or be it another cloud provider, right? We are able to do that, right? So basically, like what I said, we are platform agnostic, right? We can work in any Kubernetes distribution or platform itself. Okay. So I believe I've answered all the questions that's on the chat. Great questions, Sky. Right. So reach out to me if you actually anyone on the call. So reach out to me if you actually need more questions answered on this product itself. Okay. I'm easily can be found in linking, right? Or you can actually email me on kelvin.man@veeam.com. Okay. Last and not least, right? I want to end my note on this, right? There's a Veeam on in 2023, right? It's actually happened in Miami, right? It's happened in May 22nd to 24th. Come to it. Basically, you can come to learn from a technical perspective. You can learn more about products in terms of Veeam and Kasten, right? There will be a lot of community sharings. There will be great sessions. There's actually 40 plus sessions with different kind of 50 plus speakers itself. Most probably I'll also be there, right? So you can actually meet me there if you want to, right? And then we actually can learn more about the backup and restoration strategy that you have on your platform itself, on the different platforms. With this, right, I'm actually, there's still 10 more minutes. So I'm giving this time back to you, right? If there's any questions, I say, reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me at kelvin.man@veeam.com. All right. Thanks, everyone.